Hello everybody, welcome back to the Kemetic Monk YouTube channel. I hope you all are having a lovely day. I have been swamped recently with tests, exams, and a whole lot of other things. College has been relatively kicking my ass, and I've been trying to make videos, but unfortunately it has been a little difficult to get down to find the time to make them. But I am here now, delivering as promised on my video about what are sex offerings, how to give them, and why I don't support them. So with all that being said, let's get into the video. So sex offerings are just as the name implies. They are an offering of sex or an orgasm to your deity in replace of physical offerings. Well, I think the word replace is not a word that should be used here, because sex offerings should not replace actual offerings. Sex offerings are meant to be a once in a while kind of offering, or in the case that you don't have access to like food or something to be able to give your deity, sex offerings are supposed to kind of be a temporary solution to lack of offering. But they're also, if you really need to get something done or you need something done right now, that's what they're kind of meant to be used for. Like if you're trying to get a spell or a curse, or you're really needing help getting a job done and you need your deity's assistance, that's what sex offerings are meant to be for. So they're meant to just kind of be a sign of dedication to your deity by relieving yourself to them in that kind of way. And by relieving yourself, you are showing a appreciation for who they are, for their character, for maybe some physical attributes. It's a way of worship, essentially, and actually has a very big amount of roots in early pagan practices. Celtics had a couple writings about these kinds of practices. So that is what they are, but the question now is, how do you give? And you'd be surprised to know that giving sex offerings is not that difficult. It is just as simple as laying down in your bed or standing up if you do that. Laying down on your bed, standing up, and just relieving yourself. But to relieve yourself to your deity, so imagine you and your deity doing things or doing something together in that kind of demeanor. That's how you properly give a sex offering. It is offering an orgasm and offering some kind of worship to their body. And that is pretty much it. A couple misconceptions that this practice has that I've noticed is very prevalent amongst pagans is a lot of misconceptions on how this practice is done. A lot of pagans will tell you that during sex offerings that their gods come to them physically and have intercourse with them. I've heard many people say that they feel their deities touching them and doing things with them while they're giving the offering. That is not true. I have been working with Anubis for about 3 years. I've been a monk for a year, officially, and I have never once had Anubis ever appear during an offering. Never physically done anything like that. Some gods like Dionysus or Dionysus, someone can feel free to correct me on that, or the goddess Isis, they will have a chance of showing up and doing stuff, but they are gods that are directly associated with sex. So it makes sense that they are more prevalent in those kinds of positions. But do not expect Anubis or Loki or Seth in some instances to ever actually physically show up and do things during the offering. I don't know why they don't do much during the offerings. Well, in terms of the physical sense, but I think it mostly has to do with the fact that they are gods and we are humans, and they really don't get the same kind of pleasure that we get from these kinds of things. This is just a sign of worship, essentially. Another big misconception, though, is that people think that they're special during these offerings. There was this woman who was really into Hades. And she went on and on about how Hades told her that she is more beautiful than Aphrodite. That did not happen. I don't work much with Hades, but I can already tell you that there is no god that would ever compare you to being higher than another deity. This also kind of goes into a problem with sex offerings, which I'll start to address at a later point in the video. But no, your gods do not show up and they don't make those kinds of claims. And another thing that they don't do is they don't come into your dreams and take you away to another reality and begin to have aggressive sex with you there. That does not happen either. I'm so sick and tired of people saying that, I guess I can understand if a deity is showing up in your dreams given the character of a deity, like Loki or someone, but I am so sick of hearing people telling me that their gods literally come to them in their sleep and take them to a whole other reality where they have the most hot and steamy sex possible. That does not happen. I have never had that happen with Anubis. I've never had that happen with Seth, and the one few times I've given offerings to Isis, a goddess who is associated with sex, has never picked me up from my sleep and taken me to an alternative reality. I'm sorry, that just does not happen. And I don't want people getting a high expectation like I did when I first learned about sex offerings based on these stories that other people were telling. This is not the reality of how the offerings are performed, and this is just simply not what happens. So do not expect your deity to be incredibly active during your offering. That is not what is going on. And one last misconception I see that a lot of people have about these offerings is that you can technically do them with somebody else, like two people having intercourse, and you can dedicate the energy to the deity. That is a practice in witching, but that is not a sex offering. But, well, it is in a much vaguer sense. When you're giving a sex offering to a deity, remember what I said, that these are offerings that are meant to be done once. They're meant to be offering, not done like once in the terms of like you'll do it once and then never do it again. They're meant to be done when needed and not consistently done frequently. As I said, as I will say later in the video, they can be a bit addictive, and that can be very problematic when you're giving frequent sex offerings. And again, I'll explain some more of this in the later points of the video. But this is a practice where people, when they really want to get a spell done and they're working with a very powerful god or demon, which is specifically where some of the stuff was done with, though I don't really call them demons, that giving sex offering and sex energy allowed the spells to be more potent and more powerful, and also allowed the spells to be more received as the god that you're trying to request the assistance from. This is, again, a little bit more loose in terms of how this offering is done, because it is a sex offering, but this is not the one you should be performing if you're just trying to give energy to a deity because you need to request something small, like protection, or you need to request assistance with a test or something. You don't have to do this kind of offering. And even then, this offering specifically, in terms of how it's performed, is very different, because there's a lot of people say that you're supposed to draw a symbol on the ground and then have intercourse over that symbol. Some people say it's even used for summoning. That sex offering practice is a very different practice than the one that I am talking about. It is a thing. You can do it, and there are some gods who might request it. Dionysus is a great example, as he was a god that was well associated with sex and pleasure. So you might have instances where your gods will tell you to do that, and they may hint at that's what they want you to do. That'll be something for you to put up with your god, but I just don't want people to think that that's the offering, or to misconstrue what that offering is meant to be for. And before I switch this over to the next topic, I wanted to talk about one thing I've heard people say that their gods do in the bedroom, but I've never had this happen. Some people say your gods will tell you to play with toys. I've never had Anubis do that. I've never had Seth do that. I've heard many people claim their gods have, but I am not sure, and I don't think so, or think that that's what can occur. But if your god does do it, and your god does request it, you'll know. But I've never had that experience, so I can't say if it's done or not. So now on to the question, why do I not encourage sex offerings? There's many reasons, and I'm going to try my absolute hardest to explain this in a very uncomplicated way. But that's going to be a little tricky. The reason I do not encourage sex offerings is for the fact that they are very addictive. You can have a sexual incompatibility issue with you and your deity, and the fact that people don't know how to properly do them and get more hurt than they do help. And what I mean by this is, during sex offerings, you are very, very vulnerable. And from experience, if a sex offering is performed correctly, it feels exactly like you just had sex. And if you're not accustomed to having intercourse, or if you are getting very emotional during the offering, your body kind of starts to crave it a bit. And when doing frequently, it starts to kind of sever your relationship with your deity, because unless your gods are like Dionysus or the goddess Isis, it's a little different, because again, those are gods that are very already associated with intercourse. And I've actually noticed that people who particularly do work with those gods, who do have those kinds of relationships with those gods, or who do those kinds of offerings with their gods, they have a tendency to be a bit immune to the addictive situation, because they're kind of working with a god that's associated with it, so they're kind of already used to the frequency of it. But for some of us who work with gods of death or chaos, we're not associated with it, so it makes it us very craving of these kind of situations. Unless you're asexual and you don't have a big drive towards it, that's a different topic. But due to the fact that they're addictive, a lot of times you really want to do these offerings, but you're not really compatible with your deity. And from what I've noticed, the problem is that due to not being compatible, you sometimes have to personify your deity as something that they're not. Me, for an example, I like the bedroom aggressive. I'm not going to go too much into myself because that's just my personal information, but I like it aggressive. Anubis is not an aggressive god. He is a little tricky when it comes to some things in the bedroom, but he's not well known for aggression. I mean, he can be easy to anger, but not for getting, like, you know what I mean. And the problem is that when I want to give an offering to Anubis like that, I have to imagine him doing things that he likely wouldn't do, ever. Because that's the only way I can get myself to give the offering. But it's going against the character and the nature of Anubis, and because it is, I'm having to personify him as something he's not. When you start doing offerings incredibly frequently, and you're having to consistently personify your deity as something else, you will notice that they are becoming less and less like their true nature, or less and less the deity that you were working with originally. And if you're a beginner at all of this, you will really, like if you're a beginner at working with your god, like you've just started, you will really start to not even form a proper relationship, because you won't even know what's the nature of your deity. The more you understand your deity, the more these are easier to perform, because you can differentiate when it's yourself versus when it's your god. But in the very beginning, it can be very tricky because you don't fully understand the nature of your deity. So due to the fact that they're addictive, and due to the fact that there is always a massive incompatibility issue that can happen with you and your deity, there is just times that your offerings are hurting you more than helping you, essentially. And in terms of the hurting versus helping situation, like I said, there is a problem with insecurity that people have in the bedroom. Everybody can be insecure about an aspect of them. For instance, I don't have a very good opinion on my appearance, especially when I was giving these more frequently, I didn't. And because I wasn't grounded properly, and because I was more in distress and distraught about my appearance, when I was giving these offerings, I was more degrading myself. And it felt like my shadow, or an aspect of me that I keep hidden away, was attacking me, essentially. And which made the offering a disaster, and I don't even know why I kept trying to give it. So you don't want to give these offerings if you're not very secure and you can't get secure, you know that you're not in a good place to give this offering, don't. And under any circumstances, don't. You will be hurt, and it will not feel good. I mean, some people are into that, but I think there's a little bit of a difference in context here. But those are kind of the three main reasons I don't encourage doing them. And I also want to emphasize before I end this video, that your deities will hardly ever request these. These will not be things that your gods are going to beg you to do, or they're going to consistently ask you to do. You shouldn't have to worry about your god essentially consistently trying to get you to give an offering. Like I said before, these are gods. They are higher than us. It's a difference when you're trying to show an appreciation to them, but they are not physically having sex with you. And this kind of goes to my god spouses as well, that these are gods. You might be married to them in a sense, but these gods are not going to be physically there during these offerings. And we might be a little bit higher on the totem pole of connections and relationships with these gods, but we're not special to where they're going to make an exception just for us. So, with all that being said, I hope you all have a lovely day, and I will see you in the next video.